Hey, it's me from 911 Tech. In this video, I want to show you guys something really cool that I discovered about your MacBooks. Now, I actually work at Apple, but even Apple doesn't advertise this feature that much. So, in the past, I used to have an older MacBook Pro. I upgraded to the new M2 MacBook Pro, and then recently upgraded to the new Mac Studio. But when I upgraded to the Mac Studio, I left my old MacBook Pro here in the office and basically just kind of forgot about it for a while. Well, last week I decided to wipe the SSD and reinstall macOS on it just out of curiosity to see what it would be like to use an older MacBook like this one with the new macOS Ventura that came out recently. And so I wiped the SSD, installed macOS Ventura, and then installed all of my applications and got everything set up, just like I would if I was using this as my daily driver. Now, once I had everything set up, I was actually really impressed with how well this older MacBook Pro from 2019 actually performed with macOS Ventura. The animations were buttery smooth. It was really responsive. Everything worked great. And it made me realize there's one feature in macOS that Apple just doesn't really advertise that much, but it makes a huge difference in performance. Now, to understand this feature, we first have to talk about how Macs are designed to use their RAM. Now, Macs can use their RAM really efficiently because macOS is optimized to use what's called non-contiguous memory allocations. Basically, this means that the memory used by a process isn't necessarily all next to each other in the RAM, and this is different from how Windows uses its RAM. Windows uses contiguous memory allocations, meaning that if you launch a process, it will reserve a block of RAM that's one contiguous section. And this is actually more efficient for the Windows OS, but less efficient for the Mac OS. However, the way that Mac OS is optimized to use non-contiguous memory allocations allows the Mac to use swap memory, or SSD storage, as additional RAM. And this is really useful for Macs, because they typically come with less RAM than comparable PCs. However, this does have some drawbacks. For example, apps that require a lot of RAM like Final Cut, Pro, or Chrome might not perform as well as they would on a PC, because macOS is using swap memory or SSD space as additional RAM. Well, the feature I'm talking about is a hidden option inside of the activity monitor that allows you to allocate a certain amount of your SSD space as additional RAM for apps that need it. To enable this feature, open up the activity monitor, click on the Memory tab, and then click on the little plus icon on the bottom left. You can select the amount of RAM that you want to allocate from your SSD. You can also choose which SSD you want to use. Keep in mind, Macs typically have at least two SSDs, one internal and one external. Now, I don't recommend allocating more than 10 to 20% of your SSD space as additional RAM, because you do take a performance hit when you're using SSD space as additional RAM. However, enabling this feature can make a huge difference for certain apps that need a lot of RAM like Final Cut Pro. Now I want to hear from you guys. Have you ever used this feature before? If you haven't, I highly recommend trying it out, especially if you own an older Mac like this 2019 MacBook Pro. You'll notice a huge difference in performance. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.